I would like to speak on humility and pride tonight. Now, I'll start off with the story that got me to think about humility and pride at length for the last 2 years. It is the story of Moses and how Moses proclaims to be the most humble man, and how I heard a preacher say this, and my instant thought was how foolish, because societal's definition of humanity or humility is essentially like, if you say you're humble, you're basically implying that you aren't. Like, you can't say I'm humble while being humble. And this preacher did said the opposite. He said, imagine how humble Moses must have been. Excuse me. For him to say, I am the most humble man, and for it to be true, because this preacher believed the Bible was infallible. Now, I do not believe that, but I did entertain the idea of what if Moses actually was the most humble man, whilst still saying he was and being aware of it. And this started down the whole journey of thinking about what humility and pride was, and basically coming to the conclusion that society has no idea. Now, I've talked about it on here before, but I think I've recently, actually today, came up with a deeper and further understanding of it. And I now think that humility is realizing that all we've ever wanted was wrong, and that our rationale is so limited due to the fact that we are stuck in space and time, and we cannot conceive things outside of space and time. So we can believe, with our limited perspective, that this thing is good, that we want this thing, but we do not have we do not have divine foresight. We do not have, at least the thing, like, that the part of me that is speaking right now cannot look outside of space and time. I do believe there's things within us, like our intuition, our feelings, the still small voice. I believe these things are outside of space and time, and that's why they are our internal compass to live a life true to ourselves, and why we should always trust in the still small voice, our intuition, God, our heart, whatever you want to call it. And humility is understanding that. Humility is looking back at your life and realizing all the things I've ever wanted, if I got them, how bad my life would be. And realizing the things that I feared, the things that I didn't want, how much better they were than the things I wanted. And the things I got, the things that did end up happening, we thank God for them, because if we got what we wanted, how bad off we would be. I mean, it starts at a young age. You can even think about a kid who just wants candy 24/7, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How bad off they would be if you allowed that. And this is how the universe, this is how God works. He allows us to want these things, but doesn't allow it to happen. And in the moment, in the present, we curse our fate. We can't comprehend how everything happens for a reason, and that reason's for the best. But so often when we look backwards, we can, and it's undeniable that what we've gotten is far better than what we wanted. That's there's a Seneca quote where he basically says the exact thing I just said, and that's where I really get the idea from. He says that he thanks God that he was not granted the things that he wanted, because they were so much more evil than the things that he feared. And I think that's true. And I think that's humility. And pride is thinking that somehow, some way, we know better than God, that we know better than fate, that we know what we need. And I like to think, I like to think about, my favorite story in the Bible, which is the story of Job. And I like to think that when Job questions God and tells God to, reveal himself and explain himself, God comes down and shows Job, present day. He shows him 8 billion people on the earth, 1 billion of which, maybe even more, are Christian, and even more have been affected by his story. That even more people have come to understand faith and letting go and wanting what happens to happen and finding no greater harmony than that in Job's story. And Job can sit there and realize, if the suffering of one man was to give peace to billions, is that not worth it? And Job, being that one man, has to, say yes while being the man who suffers. And he realizes after God shows him this that, God, you're right. If you gave me this option, I would have chose. I would have chose all this suffering so that all these people in the future could learn the lesson that would bring them peace from my suffering. Because wisdom only ever is born through suffering. And I like to think that's what God showed Job, or something of that nature, because we are really limited to space and time. We are really limited to thinking that we know what's best, but we have no foresight. But when we are in the future and we look back, we can so often connect the dots. We can so often say, that really happened for the best reason. I'm really glad that happened. And of course, there's horrible things that happen, and we wish that they don't, and people will never really be able to truly accept that they did happen, and or at least accept that they happened for the best reason. But we can't stress test. We don't know what would have happened if that thing didn't happen. So there's really no reason not to have faith that everything happens for a reason, and that reason's for the best, and that we get what we need, not what we want. And that is humility. That is humility. I, for a long time, I don't pray, and I'm not religious, but for a long time I wanted to pray, and I was like, I can't pray because I read um I read the selected writings of Meister Eckhart, a Christian mystic in the 1500s, and he said that the only prayer one should pray is, God, give me the will to will as you will. And that's the only thing I've ever felt that was worth breath. And it's so simple, it's so easy, and it's done in a second. And I truly think that's humility. Realizing that God, the universe, whatever you believe in, is outside of space and time, and that it wants the best for us, and that we have to have faith in it. And even when we can't see in the moment, and even if we live our whole lives and we can never see, we can never stress test, and we can never be certain that it didn't happen for the best reason. So we might as well believe in it, or we might as well accept the fact that it's a possibility. And we can find peace if we can just accept that. And pride is thinking that somehow, with our limited with our limited sight, only here in the present, that we are able to somehow know what we want on a huge on a massive scale. We have some idea of thinking that we know what's best for the world on a huge scale, when we have no foresight, when we are completely stuck in space and time. And to me, that's pride. And Marcus Aurelius said that pride is the master of deception. And it truly is. When you start believing that you know what you need, and what you know is best, and when you don't get that, you throw hissy fits, and you no longer learn the lessons that God is trying to teach you, then that's when you fall. That's when you lose your way. That's when you no longer can see the divine mission that's taking place day in and day out, and that everything's happening for a reason, and that reason is for the best. And to me now, that is what I believe is pride. and humility. And I can see with this definition how Moses was the most humble man because he wanted God's will done more than anyone. He knew more than anybody that what he wanted was horrible, and he prayed to never get what he wanted unless God willed it. Then he was pretty happy. And that's sometimes the case. We can also glimpse into that part of us that's outside of space and time, and we can feel deeply that this aligns with God's will. And sometimes we're wrong, but other times we're right. And you get either better or worse, or you're better the wiser you are, the more vulnerable you can be to the energies and things of the universe.